What's up, everybody? It's Ken Jack, and today I'm going to be highlighting some of the biggest and best and newest properties coming to streaming in the month of August. Let's begin with Netflix and start with BECKETT, which is a brand new movie coming to Netflix on August 13th. This is an international thriller movie that stars John David Washington, Alicia Vikander, and Boyd Holbrook, and more. Here's the base synopsis. While vacationing in Greece, BECKETT, played by John David Washington, an American tourist, becomes the target of a manhunt after a devastating accident. Forced to run for his life and desperate to reach the U.S. Embassy in Athens to clear his name, tensions escalate as authorities close in, political unrest mounts, and BECKETT falls even deeper into a dangerous web of conspiracy. I couldn't find a ton out there as far as anything that can attest to the quality of the movie, which definitely has me a little bit hesitant, but I really like the cast, and I like the core concept of it so far, and it's on Netflix, so it's a quote-unquote free movie, so definitely gonna check it out. Next on Netflix is The Paper Tigers, which comes on August 7th. This is a martial arts dramedy that's been getting pretty damn good reviews so far. It's about three childhood kung fu prodigies that have grown into washed-up middle-aged men now one kick away from pulling their hamstrings, but when their master is murdered, they must juggle their dead-end jobs, dad duties, and overcome old grudges to avenge his death. I like fight movies, I like comedies, I like fight comedies, so this is really right in my my zone, so to speak. So definitely gonna check this out on the day of release. And lastly, Inception comes to Netflix on August 1st. Inception is obviously one of Christopher Nolan's best movies. It's incredible action, great sci-fi. The effects are insane, and the cast is huge. They all perform incredibly well, and an insanely good soundtrack from one Hans Zimmer. Hit that like button if you think Dom Cobb is actually still living a dream at the end. Also hit the like button if you think he isn't. Just hit the like button in general. Let's move on to HBO Max and start with The SHAWSHANK Redemption, which comes on August 1st. The SHAWSHANK Redemption is one of those movies where I think if you pulled 100 people off the street and said, what do you think the best movie of all time is, a decent fraction of them I think would say Shawshank, and for good reason too. I think it's a beautifully paced movie. It's very well acted across the board, and I think the story is just one that we can all sort of like sympathize or empathize with. Here's a little trivia fact for you. That cop right there, that's actually the voice of Mr. Krabs, among many other things. Next is Suicide Squad, which is having a simultaneous release on August 5th. I was lucky enough to see this movie about a month ago now, and I gotta say, I honestly and truly do think that everyone's going to come to the same conclusion, which is that it is by far the best DCEU movie. I know DCEU is not real, but it is. It completely earns the hard R rating that it has. It's very funny. I think the characterization across all the characters of the squad is great, especially compared to the previous one. And I think it finds a good lane that DC hasn't really gotten a part of before, as far as getting that like sort of more black comedy vibe to it and a little bit more injected humor than the previous ones. And that's not to say it's doing the same sort of formula as Marvel. I think it's a very different sort of parallel lane and it does its own thing extremely well. There is one big highlight for me, and I think a lot of people are going to feel the same way, and that is Peacemaker. John Cena is so fucking funny and actually pretty dramatic in that role, and I think I'm beyond happy he's getting his own series. Next up is the Jurassic Park trilogy, which comes on August 14th. A lot of you might only watch the first one and kind of set aside the other two, and I wouldn't necessarily blame you, but at the same time, the first Jurassic Park is one of my favorite movies of all time. It has the adventure aspect of it. It has the insanely well-built world. I think the monster effects still, or rather dinosaur effects, they still hold up very well, and that cast is still, they're unbelievable. And it is kind of weird that they're all going to be coming back together for Jurassic Park Dominion next June. Let's go to Hulu, starting with a series, Reservation Dogs, which is coming on August 9th. This series was created by Taika Waititi, who is the genius mind behind so many amazing movies and shows over the last bunch of years, and it's basically focused around 4 indigenous teenagers in rural Oklahoma, and it's around them, doing crimes and also stopping crimes. Anything that Taika Waititi touches in any respect, I'm going to be right on top of, because he is a brilliant creative mind. He's so good at comedy, and I can't wait to watch this. Hulu has another series coming out on August 31st called Only Murders in This Building. This is a sort of mystery comedy series which was created by Steve Martin. It stars him as well as Martin Short, Selena Gomez, and Amy Ryan, who I feel like I haven't seen in forever. I really like this cast. I kind of like the concept. The trailer was pretty cool, and most of all, I just really love Steve Martin, man. I mean, what an absolute gem of a human being. Let's just watch him play banjo for a little bit. And lastly, on August 1st, Hulu is adding Attack the Block. Attack the Block is a really unique sort of like a sci-fi comedy horror vibe movie. One of the early roles from John Boyega. It came out in like 2011. Really, really good movie. Definitely Britishy, so if that's not your bag, you can avoid it if you want, but I've recommended it on here 100,000 times, and I will always go to bat for this movie because I do think it's very one of a kind and super, super interesting. Let's move on to Prime Video, starting with Aliens, which comes on August 1st. I've recommended this movie a whole ton of times, and for good reason, because I truly and honestly think that it is one of the best sequels ever made, period, but in the action or sci-fi genres, or action sci-fi genre, it definitely needs to be at the top. The original Aliens movie was so like entrenched in horror, and I think James Cameron took that aspect and sort of twisted it into being more like action sci-fi, and it didn't skip a beat at all. It kept all the same sort of elements from that first one, but also just he managed to add to it while remaining faithful to the original one, and that's why I think it was so successful. Speaking of horror movies, Jaws is coming on August 1st as well. Jaws, one of the quintessential suspense or horror, whatever you want to define it as, movies ever made. It still holds up, I think, incredibly well, especially when you see the clips or the pictures after the fact of the Jaws shark apparatus, which is just so fake looking. But when you watch it in the movie, it feels so real. And they do such a great job of selling it through the acting of everyone involved in that. You know, Robert Shaw, Richard Dreyfuss, Roy Scheider, like all these guys did such a good job in this movie, and the isolation on that boat, you feel it, man. Plus, this movie features one of my favorite techniques, the dolly zoom. And lastly, In Bruges is coming to Prime Video on August 16th. I've recommended this movie a bunch too because it's one where it's the bar for me as far as black comedy goes. You know, if that's where you want, that's the goalpost. That's what you want to shoot for. It is such a good movie, incredibly well paced. I think the acting of Colin Farrell, I think it's Brendan Gleeson in it as well, where he finds they're all so good in it. So many memorable lines in that. Specifically, you know, the "you're an inanimate fucking object" line. So funny, so worth your time. I don't think it's an underrated movie because I do think a lot of people have watched it. But again, it's one that I think is underappreciated. If you haven't seen it before, I promise you, there's like a very high chance you're gonna love it. And lastly, let's just go to Disney really quick and just with one show, which is What If, coming on August 11th. What If is an animated anthology series, and it is, believe it or not, a what if scenario for all these different situations in the Marvel universe, and I think it has the potential to be really, really great. It's all animated by Jeffrey Wright, who's going to be playing the Watcher, who's a very famous comic book character, and they're going to be going through all these different scenarios, and I think that the animated medium it lends so well to this sort of thing because you're not like limited by practical CGI, all that crap. Like this, you can do really anything you want, and I love that they're doing this. All right, that's it for this episode, but make sure to check the link in our description to see a full list of all of the best movies that are coming and going from streaming in the month of August. And make sure to watch the follow-up video where I'll be telling you all of the best movies that are leaving streaming this month so that you can catch them before they go. And as always, use MovieRankings.net to find out what to watch and where to watch it. I'm Ken Jack. See you next time.